Hello, welcome to Helicopter Training Videos. In this video, we're going to continue the series looking at the Helicopter Private Pilot ACS. And in this video, we're going to concentrate on the pre-flight preparation task changes. So if you're new to the ACS and you haven't watched the previous videos, I highly recommend you go back and watch the video we did on the general ACS changes. It goes through the history, the goals, the task structure, the new coding system, what the required elements are, how the ACS document has been changed, what they've done with the special emphasis areas and ADM, as well as additional rating tables, tips, and more. As I also said, this is a continuation of the series looking at the private pilot helicopter ACS. So if you haven't seen the previous video we did on the big changes covering the auto max P airspeed changes, the 300 feet AGL rollout requirement, the flight deck management task, and the extra task in Area of Operation 5, as well as task rename and reordering, go have a quick look at that. That's a relatively short video. Like I said, the focus of this video, though, is just the pre-flight preparation area of operation. That's the first area of operation. You can see here there's some basic changes of names to the tasks. We're going to cover the detailed task changes, the changes to the knowledge and skill elements, as well as the new risk management elements, the references that you need to check out. I'll also be giving tips about things to be watching out for if you're a student or an instructor. And if you see anything I'm missing here, please let me know in the comments. So first of all, the Task A, certificates and documents, became pilot qualifications. But before we dive into why, the note at the top there has been removed. It says the examiner shall develop a scenario based on real-time weather to evaluate C, D, and E tasks. That's the weather task, cross-country task, the airspace, and the performance tasks. That's not really gone away. The entire ACS is basically scenario-based, where the examiner is going to use real-time weather or conditions that they provide to build the scenarios. But like I said, the task title has changed, and the reason is that they've removed the section that talks about the airworthiness of the aircraft or the aircraft documents. So that's been put into the next task, Task Bravo. This task now is purely focused on pilot qualifications. So because of that, they pulled out the Part 43, which is maintenance, preventative maintenance, and also the reference to the POH and the RFM. They also removed Part 67, which is a little bit strange, maybe an error, because Part 67 covers medical standards, so that's the requirements for third class, etc. In the ACS, they've added some new references, the Part 68, which is the basic med, as well as AC 68-1, which is more on basic med. So if this stuff's new to you, get in there, have a look at those references, make that as part of your study list. And you'll also see FAA Handbook 80832. This is the risk management handbook, and you're going to find that this now, because all tasks have a risk management section, this reference will be, as far as I can see, in every single task. So when we look into the knowledge sections, you can see that it's in a lot of cases it's very similar content, but it's been really spelled out. In here you can see now they're talking about knowledge of temporary disqualifications, so not just how you get your certificates, your medical certificates, but how you might get a temporary disqualification. That would probably be a new area for many. The Part 68 basic med privileges and limitations is spelled out as a required knowledge element. When I say required, I mean all of this stuff you should be looking through and think, do I know enough about each of these elements? As we talked about in the general ACS changes video, there is at minimum one requirement for knowledge, one requirement for risk management, and then all of the skill elements in each task, as well as any areas you missed in the knowledge test. Now those are just minimums. I've heard from DPs on the fixed wing side that although that seems like a very fast, efficient check ride, the reality is they often go further than just the bare minimum. Now we have this risk management section. Like I said, this is a new section for all of the ACS tasks. So it's really talking about how the applicant, are they able to identify, assess, and mitigate risks associated with, and then it will give bullet points after, it'll give elements after that. This is very often going to be scenario-based type questions. It covers here proficiency versus currency and flying an unfamiliar helicopter or operating with unfamiliar flight display systems and avionics. And those are both very good and real considerations in my opinion. Task B, airworthiness requirements. Here there's a few things they've done here. They've added some references that you should be aware of. some of which won't be in your paper FAR-AIM. For example, Part 27, which is the regulations that cover airworthiness for normal category rotorcraft, which is small aircraft like the R-22. There's also Part 29, which is for transport category. That wouldn't really apply. Part 39, which is the legal framework for the FAA using airworthiness directives, or ADs. Part 43, which you probably should already be aware of, covers areas like preventative maintenance, that kind of thing. The other two references there are the risk management book and the PHAC. I think they should also have in here the POH or RFM, but also something that has been taken out that is cancelled. They don't have it's in my mind, a good replacement for it that I'm aware of, and that's AC 9167. One of the things that this covered was how to deal with inoperative equipment with and without an MEL, and it had, although it was very dated, it had a pretty good flowchart of how you work through whether you can placard something in op, etc. As we go into the knowledge areas, some of the things that stand out are the Special Airworthiness Information Bulletins, or SAIBs. If those are new to you, they're basically information only, published by the FAA. The recommendations aren't mandatory. It's when an airworthiness concern is not an unsafe condition that would normally go into an airworthiness directive. An example for the Robinson product would be there's a 2003 Brinold main rotor blade spindle bearing, SAIB. These are things that I think pilots, operators should be aware of, so that's why they're in here. Also specifically pointing out you should know the difference between an owner, operator, and the pilot in command's responsibilities in terms of airworthiness of an aircraft. The kind of operation lists are published by manufacturers and would be in the POH or the RFM, which is why I think that should be, the POH or the RFM should be in the list of references. There is no set format, so they can look differently across different manufacturers, but you can see here the R-22 kind of operation limitations section here talks about some of the equipment you need for night operations. The last element in knowledge is Special Airworthiness Certificate Aircraft operating limitations if applicable. That would be things like light sport, experimental, and special flight permits or ferry permits. Then we go into the risk section. Inoperative equipment discovered prior to flight, so you can imagine that being a scenario-based question there that you're definitely going to get, because you always get at least one risk management question. Now we're looking at Task C, weather information. They've removed the old ACs that were referring to aviation weather, weather services, and the role of pre-flight. They've added AC 9192, which is the pilot guide to pre-flight briefing, added the usual risk management handbook and the helicopter flying handbook, and also the weather handbook, which is the new combination of all the other weather products. If you haven't seen that, that's a great book. So what we have here is a couple of notes at the top saying that an evaluator can use K2 or K3, and if they do that, they must select at least 3 of the sub-elements. Each category, so K2 has 7 sub-elements to choose from, K3 has 12 to choose from. That's compared to the PTS, which had a list of, it's talked about using elements related to weather information, analyzing weather reports, charts, and forecasts from various sources with emphasis on, and then it lists about 8 products. But you can still just do an individual element like K1, which is sources of weather. So where is this coming from? Where are some of the places you can get weather for a pre-flight briefing? Some of the items that aren't mentioned in the PTS include species, PIREPs, the seating and visibility chart, or CVA, which is now part of the Graphical Forecasts for Aviation, or GFA, along with convective outlook. Interestingly, the radar summary chart has been removed, has not been brought across to the ACS, but radar is obviously still an important part of weather information. And this section here implies the ability to explain such things as temperature and heat exchange, microbursts, types of fog, how they form, etc. And the last piece is an understanding of flight deck instrumentation of weather and digital services if they're available. So if your aircraft has that capability, make sure you know how that works. And because this is a long section, we split this into 2 slides. Here we have some specifics to be thinking about in risk management, what might cause a diversion, also talking about personal minimums. So make sure you have your personal minimums written out Don't try and work these out on the fly. Also talks about forecasting hazards, known icing. What is known icing conditions? Some confusion on what known icing conditions. The FAA has gone back and forth on that. So if you're confused about that or you want more information, I've got an article I wrote a while back on that. It also talks about the limitations of installed weather equipment and weather reports, forecasts, and in-flight weather services. So it's talking about delays on radar and need to be high enough for ADS-B ground station, radio reception, etc., to better speak to flight service station or to get that information. Under the skills section, basically talking about being able to get a weather briefing and analyze the impact of at least 3 of the items or elements that were listed on the previous page, using actual weather or weather conditions provided by the evaluator. So in this task Delta, or D, we're going to look at cross-country flight planning. First of all, they removed the AC 6184, which is the role of pre-flight prep. They added AC 9121-1, which is the use of portable electronics like your EFB onboard aircraft. Also the chart supplements, which is the renamed version of the Airport and Facility Directory, the Risk Management Handbook, and the Helicopter Flying Handbook, and helicopter route charts. Have a look at those if you haven't already. Also make sure you check out the PHAC Chapter 16 on navigation. And then there's a note that's making it very clear that you can use computer-generated flight planning. But if you do, you got to make sure that you understand where these numbers come from. How did you get from a true course line to a compass heading eventually? We still recommend that you start training with paper and the old school E6B to understand where these numbers all come from. In the knowledge section, some of this would have been covered in the PTS check rides, but now it's explicitly kind of laid out. Here again, it talks about use of electronic flight bag. That's a knowledge item. Also altitude selection, accounting for terrain and obstacles, and order rotation requirements of the helicopter. So for example, if you're over inhospitable terrain, you might want to fly higher so that you can glide to a safe landing area if you have an engine failure. Or if you have a tailwind, you'd probably want to be higher because you know that you're probably going to have to make a turn and that turn's going to eat up altitude. Those kind of considerations. Talking about climb and descent rates, which we don't have those charts in the R22 or R44 POH, but you should know your aircraft's expected climb and descent rates. True airspeed. Are you able to calculate true airspeed for a given scenario? Maybe you're going to use rules of thumb, like a 2% increase per 1,000, that kind of stuff. Also explicitly asking you to convert local time to Zulu time. It wants you to explain procedures for filing, activating, closing a VFR flight plan. So that could be through your EFB, like ForeFlight, or it could be over the phone, on the radio. You can even do it by text now. And then you can expect some sort of scenario involving in-flight intercept procedures. In the risk section, we have something you should be familiar with, which is the PAVE, areas of situational awareness. So you've got pilot, aircraft, environment, the V's for environment, and external pressures, as well as limitations of air traffic control services. So helicopter altitudes are typically quite low, and that might affect your ability for radar coverage, for flight following, as well as possible radio communications. And again, the use of electronic flight bag. The skills section is roughly the same. It does want you to prepare an assigned cross-country using real-time weather and NOTAMs to the first fuel stop with a NAG vlog, but also adding a risk analysis of the entire proposed flight, and then simulate filing the VFR flight plan. Here you can see there's a new item here. This is talking about recalculating full reserves based on a scenario provided by the evaluator. So practice this. You have your cross-country scenario, requires you to have to divert for some reason. Can you quickly work out how that's going to affect your fuel reserves? And of course, there's also the use of electronic flight bag at the bottom there. Strangely, they seem to have taken out the section in the PTS that talks about selecting easily identifiable en-route checkpoints. Maybe that's just obvious that people are going to make it easily identifiable, or maybe there's more emphasis on using your onboard avionics and GPS position, or your EFB overlay. I don't know. Here we'll look at Task E, National Airspace System. So there are again changes to the references here. We've got 93, which is the special air traffic rules. That's not in your FAR AIM, by the way. You'd have to search that on the web. Then you have the usual risk management, helicopter flying handbook, and the PHAC. You want to check out the chapter 15 in the PHAC, as well as helicopter route charts, which again, you may not be familiar with those. Best place to check those out would be SkyVector or 4Flight if you have it. Also looking at the chart symbols, a good resource which really should be in the references is the FAA's Aeronautical Chart Users Guide. Check that out if you haven't already. They also want you to make sure you understand special visual flight rules and their requirements for getting special VFR, as well as where you'd get the special VFR from, etc. The risk management section is kind of wishy-washy really for risk management under ACS. Just says, identify, assess, and mitigate risk associated with various classes and types of airspace. In the skills section, a lot of it's very similar. There is a specific mention of SATR, which is the Special Air Traffic Rules, which is under Part 93, as well as SRFA or SEFRA Ops, which is the Special Flight Rules Area Operations. It's strange that the SATR is not mentioned up in the knowledge section. In Task F, Performance and Limitations, we can see again some changes to the references. We've got the Risk Management Handbook and the PHAC in there. They also removed AC 6184, that was a cancelled advisory circular about the role of pre-flight, but also strangely removed AC 9095, which has not been cancelled, and that is unanticipated yaw, essentially LTE. There's a lot of really good information in there, and LTE is referred to later on in this particular task, so I think there was a mistake that was not in there. Regarding the other references, make sure you're looking at PHAC Chapter 11 somewhat. You can leave when it gets into the airplane-specific stuff. And the Helicopter Flying Handbook, Chapter 6 and 7. If you're flying a Robinson helicopter, 22 especially, for your check ride, you want to make sure you're looking at Safety Notice 25, which is carb ice, and when you can pull that extra, or use of carb heat rather, and when you can pull that extra 1.5 inches of manifold pressure. Also, 22 or 44, probably even the 66, the other safety notices that would be worth looking at would be Safety Notice 37, exceeding operating limits, Safety Notice 42, unanticipated yaw. In the knowledge section, it talks about an understanding of pilot technique making a difference to performance. Helicopter configuration, I'm not entirely sure what that's referring to. Perhaps that could be referring to the use of carb heat, for example. And then we have unprepared surface environment. So making approaches to what we might call an off-airport and whether you would expect in-ground effect or out-of-ground effect performance. I think that would be something that they're talking about there. And here we have a direct mention of aerodynamics as it refers to for performance and limitations. In the new risk section, a lot of the areas here are kind of covered in the PTS, but also is specifically talking about the difference between paper performance and real performance and building in a buffer. Out-of-ground effect, hover power checks, that kind of technique. It also talks about shifting, adding and removing weights. You might get a scenario regarding that. And then for the skills section, it essentially remains unchanged. So here we have Task Gulf, or G, Operations of Systems. References here are, new references are the Risk Management Handbook, as well as the PHAC. The other things I'd say about the references is to look into the Helicopter Flying Handbook Chapters 3, 4, and 11, as well as the POH Section 7, which is Systems, and Section 3, which is Emergency Procedures. Here it says if you choose K1, then you'll be assessed on at least 3 sub-elements. That's very similar to the PTS. There is some changes to the sub-elements, though. There's now transmission and associated drive shafts, so you'll be expected to explain how engine power gets transferred to the main and tail rotors. Also, K2 talks about the indications of and procedures for managing system abnormalities or failures. So that's really knowing your EPs. The risk management section is going to cover detection of malfunctions, management of those failures, and monitoring and management of automated systems. Under the skills section, it asks you to operate at least 3 of the helicopter systems listed. Well, that's going to happen every time you start a helicopter and try to pick it up, because you're going to run through engine or power plant, transmission, fuel, oil, main, tail rotor, flight controls, etc. So that's going to happen without even thinking. And like we said, the PTS special emphasis area of checklist usage has now been spread throughout the ACS tasks. So you're going to see a lot of these complete the appropriate checklist elements. Okay, we'll look at the last task in this area of operation, which is Task H, or Human Factors, was previously known as Aeromedical Factors. The new references added here is the Risk Management Handbook and the Helicopter Flying Handbook. The Helicopter Flying Handbook has a few bits and pieces that might be relevant to this, but to me the main areas you want to be looking at in the PHAC, there's a big section on a few different things like nutrition, hypothermia, optical illusions. Also, the risk management has quite a bit on hazardous attitudes, situational awareness, ADM, etc., which are elements of this particular task. Under the sub-elements, we've got nutrition added, hypothermia, specifically optical illusions, and specifically the regulations regarding the use of alcohol and drugs. There's a whole dedicated section here, K4, for aeronautical decision-making, crew resource management, and single pilot resource management. Under the risk management section, looking at to identify, assess, and mitigate risks probably associated to a scenario that you've been given regarding air medical and physiological issues, the hazardous attitudes to make sure you're good on identifying those and their antidotes. I use the I'm Air, IMAIR memory aid to remember those. Also distractions, loss of situational awareness, confirmation and expectation bias. If that's new to you, get into that risk management handbook to check that out. Under the skills section, it asks you to associate the symptoms and effects of at least 3 of the conditions and then perform a self-assessment including fitness of flight, personal minimums, etc. for the actual flight or a scenario given. So that's making sure you're doing the I'm safe checklist. If your organization that you fly with has some sort of flight risk analysis tool, you'd bring that and discuss those risks that have been identified. And also, we've mentioned this before, making sure you have personal minimums actually written down somewhere. So that's it for this area of operation. The next video will move into the next area of operation, which is pre-flight procedures. If you're watching this on YouTube, there should be a description below that would have all of the links that we've talked about, going through links to the previous part 1, the big changes, as well as the general ACS video. We also have some links to paper versions of the ACS, which are Amazon affiliate links that cost nothing extra to you but would support helicopter training videos. As always, let us know if you have anything to add or any questions in the comments below, and thanks for watching. For more videos on the Helicopter ACS, check out our full Helicopter ACS playlist. For other helicopter training videos, check out our Helicopter Maneuvers Guide, or perhaps you want to follow along with a student in the cockpit from day 1 to check ride with our full flight lesson series. And if you haven't already, please click subscribe to get all the latest videos and help promote the channel. And finally, for more information on helicopter training videos, including articles, resources, quizzes, and more, and learn how you can support this volunteer project, check out our website, helicoptertrainingvideos.com. Thanks for watching.